Hey everyone, back to another chess video. Today we're going to be looking at a pretty high-level game that I played as white, employing the Panov attack against the Caro. It is a pretty good counter to the Caro that takes a fair amount of people out of their theory, and it's nothing crazy crappy or that interesting of a counter. It just normally takes them out of where they want to be for the Caro, and even with best play, it ends up just being equal for both sides. But it's a good opening if you don't like playing that kind of Caro French style structures as white. So e4, black plays c6, the Caro. I respond with d4, d5, and then the Panov attack. E takes d5, c takes d5, and c4. So that is the Panov attack. It's entering the exchange and then the immediate c4, putting pressure on the center. From here, a lot of times the game tends to go the same in the opening. You'll develop knight f3, knight c6 or knight c3. This bishop will come out if this knight gets deployed to f6. This knight comes out, and the light squared bishop. A lot of times, black will deploy his light squared bishop to g4, pinning your knight. So your light squared bishop will come out to defend it. You want to wait a couple moves until he kind of shows his hand with his light squared bishop, because if d takes c4 and you deploy your light squared bishop and it gets kind of off of the diagonal that could just come back to e2 to defend your knight, then it gets a little bit tricky to defend d4 if he tries to exchange his bishop for your knight on c3. So there's something to keep in mind. This bishop oftentimes waits to get deployed and wants to sit on this e2 square to defend against the pin of the knight on f3. So I develop after c4, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6, and from here, I believe knight c. Oh no, the immediate bishop g5, and later in the game, you're going to see I trade this bishop for this knight. It's actually not the best move. It's an inaccuracy. So maintaining this pin really would have been best. A lot of times I do exchange it just because it kind of helps relieve any pressure of this knight jumping in or relieves a defender of the d5 square, but it is an inaccuracy, and I do have to look a bit more into it because it's not the best move. So bishop g5, bishop g4 gets played, pinning the knight. I develop the bishop to e2, prevent just breaking the pin, and if this pawn ever takes on c4, nothing to really worry about too much. It is easy to recapture this pawn. You can push d5, and when this knight gets dislodged, you can win it back with a check. But disrupting this pin is really paramount. A lot of times black may try to exchange and then take here and have kind of just one defender from white against the d4 square. But there are, depending on how the game goes and where you want to develop your pieces, a ton of different ways this opening could go. So after bishop g4, this is where I exchange. This is an inaccuracy. It would have been best just to keep developing and getting ready to go bishop e2 and castle. But I was thinking, let's get a defender off of this d5 square and maybe eventually take. But definitely an inaccuracy. So he responds e takes f6. From here, I was looking to develop my knight, and I knew if he takes, I would have pushed. If he exchanged, I would have captured with the queen, and then if he took on d4, I would have had this check. We're going to see that actually happens later in the game. He takes on d4, this bishop is exchanged, my queen is sitting on f3, and I give this check. I just completely forgot, didn't forgot that the queen can block, and then my queen is pinned to my king. and then I kind of have to exchange. That ends up being the way the game goes, but as I was sitting here evaluating this position, that's what I was kind of thinking was this is probably going to get exchanged, or either I'm going to take it. The knight's going to be looking at this pawn, and he's going to want to exchange this bishop for knight on f3. So that's kind of where I was at. But I was looking to just develop and get ready to castle. So knight c3, bishop b4, pinning the knight. I wasn't too worried about this exchange because then I just have the d4 pawn supported. From here, I was debating taking first or going bishop e2 to break up the pin. I'm not sure if either one is particularly better. I know the engine says c takes d5 is best, but let's see. If I go bishop e2, is anything particularly bad? An inaccuracy, d takes, and what if I push? About d5. Oh, black is better. Okay. Bishop takes. Bishop takes. And I'm assuming like knight there, maybe? Yeah, knight e5. Supported by the pawn. Okay. That makes more sense. So to go back, c takes d5 is best. That is what I play in the game, so that's good. He immediately exchanges, and obviously you're going to take back with the queen. You're not going to take back with the pawn and disrupt your pawn structure on the king side. However, that does let in knight takes d5, or knight takes d4, which gets played in the game. And now, I'd calculated this before. I thought my knight defends this pawn. I can give this check, possibly win the knight. However, I didn't see the queen, the queen blocking, and then my queen is pinned, so I kind of have to take. So, in the game, I give this check. Actually, let me on this. I give this check. Queen e7, which is I think the best move. And it wants what is it? Bishop here. I don't think I looked at this. Bishop here, and then queen takes, pawn takes, and this knight doesn't have this check, this fork. So knight doesn't really have anywhere great to go. So let's think. Let's just kind of see this line. Bishop out. Queen takes. Let's say queen takes. And then white wins the knight. But let's see what the engine would have rather. We want a6, supporting that knight move there. What about, say, the immediate castle? That's probably what I would have played in the game. Castle, it's an even game. Not sure why it has these two engine lines where white's +4 or black is -9. A little weird, but the engine line suggests queen takes, and here, assuming knight back here. Yeah, knight b5. Probably here, here. Assuming white's better here, but it's about even. So back to the game. I played queen takes e7. It's an inaccuracy. Bishop d3 would have been better, as we just saw. So I see that now. Just my second inaccuracy of the game, but I actually play the rest of it pretty well. But you can see, even in accuracy, it's still an even game. It's nothing too crazy. It's nothing too drastic or decisive. Queen takes e7, check. Responds with bishop takes. I do get my bishop out. What I was thinking here was defending this square and this square. I wasn't even thinking about where the knight's going to go, because I just didn't have any way to attack the knight. So I was thinking bishop out, because I saw this fork and what would be a check here. And then black responds with castles, castles. From here, I identified my passed pawn, my isolated passed pawn. Only one defender. It is on a light square right now, so I do have a bishop that can defend it for the time being. I knew I had to put a rook behind it, and I knew he was probably going to try to double up, maybe eventually get this knight out of the center here and maybe possibly block it. So I thought, let me try to get my rooks to better files, get my light squared bishop ready to support it, and eventually try to push it. That was my thinking at this moment. Black is looking to evacuate this knight, or at least exchange this knight so it's not a complete loss. So he plays a6, looking to hop his knight in here, and then I can exchange it. I play rook fe1, looking to take the open file, looking to put this rook behind this pawn. It's listed as an inaccuracy, but I think it's just my engine's a little bit slow, because it's that or rook fd1, and I don't think there's a major difference between the two. I know it says rook ft1 is plus 0.6, but I think that's like about even, really. My eval bar is glitching a little bit, but it's rook fe1, rook f to d1, really kind of all the same. Rook fe8 is played. Not sure why my eval bar is glitched. I play rook a to d1. I have this open file, and then this rook behind this passed pawn. That was my thinking in the game. Really, still kind of about even. No one is particularly better or worse. Here spawns bishop c5, supporting the knight. What I could have done is like bishop back here, and then the knight really has nowhere to go. So that's why you have to pull the bishop back to support the knight. Here, I was kind of thinking king f1 because I want to keep this rook supporting the pawn. So if he ever tries to exchange rooks, then I can recapture with the king. But in the game, what I play? Let's scroll down a little bit. Oh, h3. So here, h3. I prophylactic move, just getting a luft for the king. It's an inaccuracy. It looks like rook takes e8 is best. Let's see why. Takes e8. And rook takes. Waiting for my engine to catch up a little bit because there's a little glitched. 94. I'm assuming bishop here. Back. b4. b4 best. Let's look at that line. Why is b4? 8. On storm down the board. 6. Maybe restricting this bishop a little bit. I think that's probably why. 4. Restricting this bishop. Or restricting this bishop here. King f8. Like an even game, but this b4 looks like restricts this bishop here and here. Interesting. This is not a line I was looking at, but this is an interesting line. To go back to here, I wonder, because in the game I probably would have looked at knight here. Let's see what it thinks about this. Knight d6 is fine. There. Oh, there, and I lose that pawn. Then this knight. I don't see this knight really going anywhere. About F1. How do I save the knight? How do I save the knight? Gotta go back. Let's look at this. Taking here is a blunder because... Oh, and my king... If my king is on F1, then I can kind of move here and protect my rook. All right, I see that. Interesting. So the knight can take the pawn. It's an even game, but the knight can take on B7 because the bishop can come and protect, but only after I move my king here so that this check not lose my rook. Interesting. All right, let's get back to the game. H3 and an accuracy. Looks like rook takes his best for the lines that we looked at, but I was thinking, let me just make a luft for my king, just get a little bit safe. It's still an even game. We're on move 17. It's still even. We're both playing pretty high-level moves, or pretty high accuracy moves. A couple inaccuracies, but nothing game-changing at all. Nothing that drastic. To continue on, he goes king f8. This is going to be going to go down to a rook endgame most likely, and you want to have your king ready to come to the center as needed. Bishop b1. This knight defends here. If this rook exchange, I can reach capture the rook. There's no swapping the knight in here, not here, not here. He can go here, but I can recapture with the knight. So that was my thinking of just sliding the bishop back, and now this rook has vision here, and I'm not worried about any captures or exchange. Rook a d8, just getting a look at that pawn. King f1. If any recaptures, I can capture with the king, and then this rook maintains vision on the pawn. Rook takes here. I believe rook takes e1 is what I play. Knight still protects the pawn, and if he wastes the tempo going bishop here, then I can just move my rook back to d1. Takes e1, bishop b4, rook back. Simple. This knight now has to move because it is getting attacked. If this bishop takes, I just recapture with the pawn. The only place this knight can go is here. So after knight moves, two attackers on this knight, so I would have to exchange it. And it would be opposite colored bishop, single rook, and I have a single passed pawn. But it really is just an even game because with proper defending, there's really no imbalances or way to break through unless someone makes a mistake. However, he plays bishop takes c3 first. This is not a game-deciding move. However, it becomes very important later as a mistake gets made later, and you're going to see why. So bishop takes, pawn takes. This knight has to move. Only safe square is b5, attacking the pawn. In the game, I saw knight takes and this fork. I was debating going here to rook d3, but that would have blocked in my bishop, and I just didn't see a good way for my bishop to get out. That wouldn't have been a couple turns. So what I did was I pushed c4. Pushing c4 connected pawns. This rook is no longer at threat of taking on d5. Even though it's not connected past pawns, it's strong in the center. It's a strong center, and I have a pretty easy way to push this pawn should that ever have to happen, or that opportunity ever arise. He plays knight c3 anyway. I knew this really wasn't a good move. I think it's still even, but I just wasn't worried about it because if he exchanges for the bishop, You move the rook out of the way, you exchange it for the bishop, you recapture with the rook. You're staring at b7, so he has to defend it. And then I can just walk my king up, and somehow, some way, I'll be able to push these pawns. That's what I was thinking in my head, so I was like, I'm not worried about this knight exchanging for the bishop at all. Rook c1, knight takes b1, rook takes b1, rook d7, having to defend to b7. And then I just start walking my king up. I wasn't worried about any checks because I can get my king just further into the center, and there's really nowhere that the rook is going to be able to infiltrate. So I can kind of position my rook on maybe b2, controlling my second rank, and then just walk my king up and get ready to keep pushing my pawns. So in the game, after king e2, king e7 is played. To go back to explain this miss a little bit, so here, rook b6 is best, and it says it's a miss by going king e2. I did not see this in the game at all. Basically, looks like you're going to lose this pawn. Rook takes, and then you take here. But I thought he could, I'm thinking he can get his rook here, but maybe I'm not clicking the best moves. Back. Rook d7's a mistake. Rook b6. I thought there was a line where the king just comes straight here, but maybe I'm wrong. Six. Rook c7. I think my engine is kind of glitched because this was a line that I looked at after the game, but this was a line I looked at after the game, but I don't think it went this. I don't think this was the way that I thought going. Rook here, push, and king just slides there, so you don't want to do that. So let me see what the rook a7, 8, rook takes. And then you have this pass pawn, this pass pawn. White is doing better. Interesting. I did not see that in the game. Didn't see it. So I go king e2. Back to the game. I go king e2. Looking to just walk my king to the center and support these passed pawn. King e7. Oh, I remember. This is the line I looked at. Rook b6 here, and the king is this is the line I looked at. So this is much better for white. King d8, and the king's going to come here, but there's really kind of nowhere for the king to go, and this rook gets stuck. So this is the line I looked at. After king e7 was the mistake. So king e7's a mistake. There's really, it's a bit premature for bringing the king in, and once this rook comes to b6, you kind of cut it off from getting to the pawns. This rook gets a little bit trapped because it's really unable to go anywhere once this pawn gets pushed, supported by the rook. And the king can't even infiltrate to try to attack the rook and kick the rook out. That's why that's a mistake. In the game, I go d3, king d3, just looking to get my king in the center. King d6. So here is a pretty important idea in king endgames, king and pawn endgames, because he goes king d6. This rook really doesn't have any good options for where it can go. So the king is looking to control these two squares and prevent this pawn from going forward. However, there's nothing stopping me from going d4, king d4. And when you do that, you enter opposition with the king. And now the king can never go to these two squares. And you're actually able to push these two pawns because it's supported by your king. So King d6 is a mistake. It's a miss. It's a mistake because I enter opposition with his king. His rook really has nowhere to go because if he tries to go here, then I'm just pushing my pawns down the board and go there. And white is just throwing them down the board. This rook is coming in here to b7. So really a bad move going king d6 because you enter opposition to the king and you kind of force it to move somewhere. And with these two pawns, you're able to just bully the rook and king around. King d4. White is much better. So to go back to a little bit earlier, when he exchanged his bishop for my knight on c3, and you recapture with I recapture with a pawn. Pushing that pawn gave me these two connected pawns, which allows all of this to happen later in the game, where these two are connected, so he couldn't just immediately capture d5, and he has to work on trying to infiltrate or get some type of counterplay going by getting this rook in attacking c4, but he ends up being a bit too slow and trying to get his king in the center, so he is unable to infiltrate with the rook because he wastes too much time. He's unable to attack these connected pawns with his king, so it ends up being that I'm able to just throw my rook down the board and start pushing these pawns, and he has nothing to really defend it and no counterattacks or counterplay going on. So these two connected pawns, just from that one exchange on c3, really kind of decided how the rest of the game went because of a couple of mistakes that come later on. Even though it was even all the way up to just a couple moves ago, a couple mistakes of wanting to get his king to the center, wanting to get his rook in front of the pawn, that were just not applicable to this specific game, lead to a decisive attack for the white side. And it's all due to these two connected pawns. So he plays king c7. Really, there's not any good options here because this rook really isn't able to go anywhere, and this king is not really able to go anywhere. So I'm able to just kind of start pushing things down the board. Rook e1, just controlling the open file. He's never attacking this pawn. Something that I was thinking was playing a4, just kind of preventing any shenanigans here. Looks like c5 is best. Oh, yeah, just the immediate c5, immediately getting these pawns down the board. But it's kind of an all roads lead to Rome type situation a bit. You do have to be careful because it is definitely still a losable position. But this was my thinking was rook to the open file. So if this rook ever comes here, I'm just exchanging for it, and I'm pushing these pawns down the board. King d8. Just wasting tempo now. Really nothing. No plans, really, is what it seems like. If he goes rook here, I'm exchanging and I'm pushing these pawns, and there's nothing going on for the black side. It's too little too late. My pawns are too far forward. This rook is too strong. This rook is too passive. And with these connected pawns, I have an ability to kind of get my king in, attack these pawns. So there's really not much going on for the black side. This king came all the way here, came here, and back here for nothing. Just for nothing. A4, just preventing any shenanigans here. G6, not really sure what he was expecting with G6. Maybe just getting, some counterplay down here. But really, it's just a matter of time before I start pushing these pawns. A5, you can never go here because I take en passant. You go here, I'm definitely taking. H5, maybe trying to get some counterplay. Maybe eventually his rook might come this way, but it's just, there's not enough time. These pawns are so far down the board, and I can kind of force an exchange with the rooks. There's nothing going on. G4, Just trying to get some exchanges, trying to freeze these pawns on the king side, just so just so he kind of runs out of tempo to waste time. H4, C5, start pushing my pawns down the board. Engine likes F3, just trying to kind of freeze up the king side and prevent any counterplay there. If I just exchange, yeah, just rook takes E7, king takes E7. Here, F4. If he plays here, I freeze the pawn structure. I freeze the king side pawns, and he runs out of tempo. King D7, and then I can just walk. Oh no, maybe I can't walk this way. King D4. Okay, yeah, all right, good. And you can oh, what does it say? D6. There's really, yeah, okay. It's just going a little weird. There's really nothing for black side to do here. The white pawns are too far down the board. There's no other tempo that he can waste, no other pawn movements. So really not great for the black side. It's lost. That's +5, but it's really just lost. I play G5, either looking to induce this and letting my king have space, or induce an exchange and then kind of freezing both pawns, both pawn chains. So when you're looking at a king and pawn endgame, you want to look for freezing backwards pawns. So this and this are backwards pawns. This A5 pawn freezes this from ever moving forward because I can just take, and then I'm only 2 squares away from queening, while this is many squares away from queening. And then in the game, if he takes, I take, and then you have the same scenario where I can take on, I can take F6, and even if he gets, his king around, in this scenario, I can just kind of squeeze my king in, and any pawn pushes, let's go here. I know I can just push this pawn, but I would be close enough that I could capture these 2 pawns. So freezing backwards pawns is always something to look at because, one, it prevents your opponent from wasting tempi, and it controls the board in a way that if he does decide to use any last remaining tempi, then you can take and threaten another passed pawn going down the board. So he plays king E7, take with check, takes, and from here, it's completely lost because I can just push D6, and there's really no way of stopping my king from getting in. I played C6. It says C6 is best, but I think D6 is also probably going to say this is best. I think my engine is D6 is excellent. So it's really +7 no matter what. So black is lost. The game is over. I have a passed pawn. My king is coming. Going to capture this pawn. Going to promote. And really, it was all kind of made possible from earlier in the game. Go. Here, letting me exchanging the bishop, although it's perfectly fine if you play well for the rest of the game, it sets up connected pawns in the center, one of them being a passed pawn, that is just so hard to deal with. And I'm sure, if you're a grandmaster, this is probably a pretty trivial endgame. But at my level, it's so easy to make a mistake like this king E2 on my end, but king E7 that just completely throws the game. And that's the tough thing about rook and pawn end games, or just king and pawn end games, is that one single move, pushing a pawn 1 square instead of 2 squares, or pushing a king, going on a diagonal instead of straight on, not in this exact position, but that can completely go from you can defend a position to completely lost, or a completely won position to a dead drawn position. It's so tough to play these positions, and having these connected pawns just made it much easier for my end to be able to get my king to the center and not have to worry about really too much shenanigans, and made it a lot easier to defend my my passed pawn. So this game, Panov attack, Caro, characterized by just solid principled chess and identifying a strength towards the endgame of a passed pawn and an exchange that favored my end, and then playing towards that favored, playing towards that strength. So that strength being able to connect these pawns and then get my king to the center a little bit easy. So I think bad move to exchange on this, even though it's even, it just makes it much easier to play and simpler to play from white from then on. So good game by my opponent. One or two mistakes in the end game after really just solid play the whole way through. Completely brought it from a even game to a completely lost game. But that's kind of how it goes. Really good game. Good opening, good middle game by both sides. It was even up until just one misstep, and then the whole game is lost. But sometimes that's just how it goes. I'll see you guys in the next one.